Hi, my name is Noriega, and today I'm going to talk about Cubism. But first, what is Cubism? Cubism was one of the most influential visual art styles of the early 20th century. It was created by Pablo Picasso and George Braque in Paris between 1907 and 1914. The name of this artistic movement appeared because the art critic Louis Boussel coined the term Cubism after seeing the landscapes that Braque painted in 1908 in the emulation of Cézanne, and he called the geometric forms as cubes. The Cubism describes a revolutionary style of visual art, and the two artists led a break from traditional European ways of representing space and figures. Uh, the groundbreaking work of Picasso and Braque was embraced and then developed by Salon Cubists, whose exhibitions at the Salon d'Automne were instrumental in introducing Cubism to a broader audience. Then their innovations laid the foundation for several major art movements, such as constructivism, futurism, suprematism, and Dutch tale. And the synthetic cubism influenced Dada and Surrealism. And finally, the painting Le Demoiselle d'Avignon, created in 1907, is recognized as the first proto-cubist work. And now I want to talk about the stages of cubism. First, we have the analytical cubism, also called as the hermetic cubism. And around 1910, cubist artworks still showed recognizable subjects, but they were broken into geometric shapes and resemble in abstract forms. Picasso and Braque reduced their images to overlapping planes in muted colors like browns, grays, and blacks, and they often included letters and focus on still life, such as musical instruments, bottles, glasses, and new papers, and also human faces and figures. And this phase is considered the purest form of Cubism and also the most difficult to interpret. Then we have the synthetic Cubism, which introduced a new technique called papier-collé, where Picasso and Braque used pieces of colored or printed paper. And unlike the analytic cubism, which broke objects into small parts to represent them, the synthetic cubism used flat shapes in everyday materials like paper, fabric, or labels to suggest real objects more directly, often by cutting them into recognizable forms or adding graphic elements. And now here we have some characteristics of this movement. And the Cubist painters reject the concept that art should copy nature or that artists should adopt the traditional techniques of perspective and modeling. And instead, they wanted to emphasize the two dimensionality of the canvas. So they reduce and fracture objects into geometric forms and then realign this with like a shallow and like a relief like space. And to understand it better, here I have seven key points. The first one is the construction of reality, which says that objects are broken down into geometric forms like cubes, planes, cylinders, and so on, and they are shown from multiple viewpoints at the same time. Then we have the multiple perspectives, where traditional Renaissance perspective is abandoned, and several angles of the same object appear in a single image. Then we have the muted color palette, and in the analytic cubism, it's common to see brown, grays, and ochres, but in the synthetic cubism, we have brighter and more decorative colors. Then we have the rejection of naturalism, and it means that Cubism doesn't want to imitate reality but wants to interpret it. Then we have the use of collage, which means that real materials are added, such as paper, newspaper, wood, and so on. Then we have the lack of depth, that it means that the illusion of three-dimensional space disappears and the image becomes flat with overlapping planes. And finally, we have the common subjects, that it means that it's common to see portraits, uh, and also musical instruments, still lives, and yeah, but basically like everyday objects. And now I think that it's important to talk about the two founders of this movement. So first, we are going to talk about Pablo Picasso. He was a Spanish painter, a sculptor, and artist, and it's considered one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. Picasso began his studies at the School of Fine Arts in the Guarda, and he had a blue period, and this is a period in Picasso's life that reflects the sadness and isolation caused by the suicide of his friend Casagemas. And this is shown through a cold color palette and themes of human misery and despair. Then we have the Rose period, which is influenced by his love for Fernand, that led to sensual and erotic designs. Then his painting Le Demoiselle d'Avignon marked the beginning of Cubism. Then in 1927 he met Marie Walter, and her anatomy inspired his large three-dimensional heads, and this marked another traumatic shift in his artistic path. Then between 1948 and 1955, Picasso developed a strong interest in ceramics and sculpture, which he alterned with large mural paintings. In 1970, just a few years before his death, Picasso exhibited 167 paintings and 45 drawings from the previous year, and finally he died on April in 1973 in France. We have George Braque. He was a French painter, sculptor, and engraver, and today he is known for his leading role in the history of Cubism. When he was young, his parents signed him up for some classes at the École des Beaux-Arts, where he learned the craft of decorative painting. In 1902, he met Marie Laurent and Francis Picabia, who influenced him with the Fauvism movement. Then in 1907, the Paul Cézanne retrospective and the painting Le Demoiselle d'Avignon was a revelation for him, since he created the standing nude in the same year. Then the critic Louis Bussell described his work as forms reduced to geometric patterns, to cubes, which was the beginning of Cubism. Later, he introduced the technique papier collé, which are collages of newspapers, wallpaper, and posters to form a flat surface of paper. Then in 1952, with the decoration of the ceiling of the Etruscan room of the Louvre Museum, He became the first artist to be exhibited in the museum during his lifetime, and then he died in Paris on 1963. And now I would like to introduce you to other artists so you can learn more about this movement. The first one is Juan Gris. He's considered the third most important Cubist artist. Then we have Fernand Lisi. He introduced a more mechanical and colorful style in Cubism. And then we have Albert Glaze, and he's the co-founder of Salon Cubism, which was more accessible to the public. And now I would like to talk about this painting, which is called Guernica. And Guernica is a powerful anti-war painting, and it was created by Pablo Picasso in 1937. It is inspired by the bombing of the town of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War. It was commissioned by the Spanish Republican government for the Paris International Exposition. The painting reflects the horror and the suffering caused by the attack on civilians. And as you can see, its name is Guernica. It was created in 1937 by Pablo Picasso. Right now, we can find it in el Museo Nacional Centro de Arte Reina Sofía. The art movement is Cubism art. It was created in Paris, France, and the main topics are war, suffering, death, and injustice. And the periods or movements are synthetic cubism and modern art. The materials used for this painting are oil on canvas, and the techniques are large scale painting and the cubist fragmentation. And also, there are famous examples of paintings by Pablo Picasso are Le Demoiselle d'Avignon, The Weeping Woman, and The Girl with a Mandolin. And now, talking about the properties, Guernica is an oil on canvas painting that uses a monochromatic palette of black, white, and gray to highlight the scene's tragic and the dramatic tone. Picasso applies synthetic cubism through fragmented, simplified forms and overlapping figures that distort reality, reflecting the chaos of the world. And the geometric shapes and symbolic elements express deep emotions and the suffering. And now, talking about the aesthetic experience, this artwork reflects the difficult and heartbreaking moment that society, in Guernica was going through due to the war. And in those phases, it can be seen the suffering, the anguish, and the fear that floated the atmosphere. And related to the emotions, it's interesting because Picasso manages to create some empathy with those who live this event because he makes us imagine the situation, and the sadness and the sorrow fill the body to the terrible circumstances. And it also allows us to imagine the physical and the mental pain of losing everything every day. And finally, talking about the iconography, there we can see a ball that symbolizes the brutality and the darkness. We can see a horse that represents the suffering of innocent people. We have a mother with a child that shows the grief and the civilian cause of war. And finally, we have flames and open mouths that symbols the chaos, the agony, and the terror. And finally, I would like to conclude sharing with you my personal opinion. And I think that Cubism is a revolutionary movement that challenged all those traditional artistic movements. I think that it allows us to see the world from a new and complex perspective by fragmenting and restructuring every possible form. And also, I think that Picasso and Braque created a new approach that not only transform art itself, but also change the way we see perception, time, and space. And I believe that Cubism is a way of showing that reality is not something one dimensional. It's all these different perspectives that when we combine them, we can create a richer and a deeper representation. And I think it's a style that invites reflection, encouraging us to look beyond the surface and to understand art and the essence of things for multiple angles. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.